Hello and welcome to Charger Bulletin News. My name is Tyler Wells, and today we have a special guest joining us. On Monday, the university concluded its months-long search for a new president. This led to the announcement that Dr. Jens Frederiksen will become the 7th president in university history, formally beginning his service at the end of the academic year. Dr. Frederickson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, we're glad that we could get you in here and introduce you to the university community. Can you take a moment to introduce yourself, give a little bit of your background and kind of what brought you here?
Yeah, I'm born in Denmark, grew up in Luxembourg, sort of lived all over, a little bit in France, a little bit in Germany, a little bit in Spain, and then eventually came to the United States 24 years ago on a tennis scholarship at Vanderbilt. I traveled around the world and played a little bit of professional tennis. Ended up at Vanderbilt in sort of a roundabout way. Was obviously an older first-year freshman student, so that was an interesting experience, and just had an incredible journey at Vanderbilt, in part because maybe I came in sort of having a different perspective, and so by then I was pretty focused, and so went through undergrad, and then sort of one thing led to another. Never thought I'd end up in academia. And yeah, I had some wonderful professors that were kind of like, oh, well, you should stay and do a master's degree. And sort of one thing led to another, and eventually I got my PhD there. I got some incredible teaching experience in the process. And then taught at Swanee, the University of the South, and then eventually came to Fisk as a visiting professor after having done some economic development, foreign direct investment work with the state of Tennessee. And yeah, spent 8 years there in administration, 7.5, and now here. So, yeah.
Awesome. Now, I think the question that's on everyone's mind to start off this interview is, have you gotten the chance to try the famous UNewHaven pizza yet?
I have. I went to, is it called Bar? Not even the bar, just Bar.
Bar's one of them.
I'm an insider now. I cross over the Q Bridge and go to the bar. And so I tried it yesterday, and I actually sat next to a lovely couple that insisted on the fact that I had to try the mashed potato.
The mashed potato pie, yep.
Which wasn't what I ended up ordering, but they did let me try theirs, and so it was very good.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you'll get accustomed to here is the pizza, and everyone will let you know about it. So obviously you were greeted on Tuesday with a big New England snowstorm. Being in the Nashville area for so long, how do you kind of foresee, or how has the adjustment been to coming up to the Northeast to New England?
Well, right. I mean, I'm obviously Scandinavian, southern part of Scandinavia, so the weather isn't as dreadful as that. But sort of ironically, we had a major snowstorm in Nashville about a week and a half ago. So I think somehow the snowstorm seems to be following me. Obviously, super excited. My wife's family has some roots in Connecticut. I've obviously been in Nashville for a very long time. Sort of seen Nashville transform in really interesting ways, and everybody has been so welcoming. I mean, I think part of the joke is I've been at the Omni Hotel now long enough to where I think they think I'm the manager of one of the floors, and they brought me Valentine's yesterday, which really know you've overstayed your welcome. But yeah, no, it's everybody on campus has been incredibly forthcoming and just very, very kind, and super excited to make that transition. And of course, initially it will be sort of commuting a fair bit, given the fact that my kids are still in school. Can't just yank them out of school. And then I think the whole family sometime mid to end of May will be moving up here.
Awesome. So. Yeah, and you're joining us from Fisk University. There you served as Executive Vice President for Institutional Advancement and Enrollment Management. Can you kind of discuss your experiences at Fisk and how that's helped prepare you for a role such as this?
I came to Fisk as a visiting professor 9-10 years ago, and it was an institution that was incredibly special. Sort of, in some ways, has contributed more to the fabric of American life than sort of, I think, generally acknowledged, given its alumni, given the role in sort of civil rights movement, the sit-ins, and yet had gone through a very difficult stage, which is not unusual for universities these days. It's an incredibly difficult marketplace to be in, sort of driven by these sort of billion-dollar behemoths, and then your big state schools, and so a very tough environment serving a very large Pell population. And at the end of the day, as much as you may not want to talk about sort of the business of higher ed, but unless you can run a sustainable business, you can't, I mean, I would say that's sort of the condition for the possibility of delivering on dreams, maximizing return on investment, student experiences, helping them sort of on this incredibly important journey. So unless you can really find ways to operate that are sustainable, which is very hard to do, particularly when you're sort of serving a student demographic that depends heavily on the institution. And so I was sort of thrust into a very difficult set of circumstances where enrollment had plummeted. The university had just a really hard time sort of clearing accreditation issues with purely around the financials, and yet the students were magical. The story was sort of very, very special, and I'm somebody I care about outcomes, and I really care about sort of understanding that higher ed really is a platform for students to, I mean, at the end of the day, they will define the next chapter of industry, of artistry, of innovation, of policy, and so I felt like I could really be helpful on that front. And so I started with a series of offices, most sort of importantly maybe institutional advancement under my purview, and then the university had really struggled to raise money, and we kind of shattered every record and raised an extraordinary amount of money. And then sort of in the process, there was marketing, there was career service. I mean, it was all sort of a very deliberate vision of what could be done. And then enrollment management, because at the end of the day, that's the lifeblood of an institution. You got to bring the right students in, students who can take advantage of these incredible opportunities. And so we grew enrollment by 70%, the caliber of students, the rate at which students were investing in themselves. And so, yeah, an incredible run. And next thing you know, we were featured in Forbes as the #1 institution in the country for what they called academic stewardship, which is really sort of an ROI metric of whether, per dollar spent, whether we were really turning out outcomes, and clearly we were apparently the best at that. So yeah, we had just a wonderful journey, and I loved every step of it. So.
Yeah, the university has certainly turned into a prestigious icon, really. And I think another aspect of it is you're coming from an HBCU to a predominantly white institution. How do you kind of foresee that change, that adjustment?
Well, so let me go back to, and this sort of dovetails the previous answer a little bit. I think at the end of the day, this is sort of a watershed moment for higher ed. Inflationary costs, debt cycles, alternatives. I mean, Google and Microsoft are now offering certificates. I think it is incumbent upon academia, which isn't always sort of the most transformative, ironically, right? Because they should be at the very forefront of sort of transforming and having its finger on the pulse of sort of what students are looking for, what the marketplace, what the times are looking for. And I think at Fisk, what we really sort of understood is that students and parents, and I think the same here at UNH, I think are looking for institutions that rise to the occasion, that understand that this is a significant, I mean, we live in a world where people are sort of filled with hyperboles of like, oh, most important decision you'll ever make. But higher ed really is an incredibly important decision to make. It's 4 years. So I think it is incumbent upon institutions to deliver, I think the demands of what today's students and parents are expecting is far higher, as it should be. Again, the inflationary costs. And so we really created this incredible ROI machine that really, it was sort of, if we didn't have a sports management program. Yeah, a lot of our students wanted sports, and so I was able to broker a relationship with the Los Angeles Lakers, and all of a sudden we could send students that way, right? And I think as an administrator, you really are, I mean, the whole thing is sort of a comprehensive whole. All aspects of the university have to be firing on all cylinders. In some ways, you're only as good as your weakest link. And so having overseen as much of sort of the operations, and really at the end of the day being so deeply involved with students, that's why you're there. I think if everybody sort of sees themselves as the platforms for which students can then go all over. And again, you referenced the sort of the difference between an HBCU and a PWI. I do think that part is transcendent. I think that applies to, and I have to say, when I first looked at the University of New Haven, I was really, really encouraged by I mean, just walking around, but also looking at sort of the numbers. This is a university that is filled with young people that look like the world we live in, the world I think we all want to live in. And so that dynamism, in some ways, I mean, of course, an HBCU is slightly different. It's a different sort of interesting sort of different empowered culture setting there. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to replicate that across every university. It can't just be, I mean, to really create empowering platforms for students of all backgrounds, global, local, socioeconomic, gender, sexuality, to feel empowered to be themselves and to excel at the highest levels. Mm-hmm. And so seeing that reflected in the student body, I mean, that is how we're going to change the world, mm-hmm. right? And if we're not changing it here and not providing these incredible platforms, then where are we doing it, right? So it's no surprise that we then end up in sort of very conflicted scenarios elsewhere if we're not working this out in the formative stages.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like you're very student-oriented, mm-hmm. Which I know a lot of the students here on campus will really appreciate. We kind of take a lot of pride in that kind of sense that a lot of the stuff here, from what we see, is pretty student-driven. Yep. And having someone that's very student-oriented kind of really feeds into that. Yep. Kind of moving on from that, so kind of, I guess, piggybacking on that. Yep. What are some things, obviously you've been kind of a short time here so far. What are some things that you may have seen that you want to improve upon, yep. Right away, or if not, what are some long-term goals yep. That you kind of have both for yourself and the university?
Well, I think it sort of fits that mission, right, of really understanding sort of, and clearly the University of New Haven has had a lot of momentum, which is exciting. So something is resonating, and it may very well be sort of what you're alluding to, that there is already a built-in, I mean, I was sort of smitten with the can-do culture, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a culture of doers, the next generation will be shaped by doers. I kind of am a doer. Mm-hmm. I know I could find more eloquent language for that, but at the end of the day, it's sort of about getting it done. No pun intended, right? We're kind of staying within that theme. But I think, I also think that you can build upon that, right? You can create additional pathways. You can, and in some ways it's not that others couldn't replicate that, but others aren't doing it. So if you're sort of first to it and really creating these on-ramps for students and then really shoring up sort of the comprehensive experience, because it's not just academic anymore, it's professional, it's networks of opportunities, it's psychological, social, cultural, artistic. You got to really create a wraparound experience. You referenced the tight-knit. Mm-hmm. I would sort of say, I came from kind of a family atmosphere. This is just a much larger family, mm-hmm. but it still feels this way, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there is a moment in time now in higher ed where there is sort of a vacuum to step into that I think you can resonate with young people who are incredibly motivated and driven. And this is a generation that's driven by impact to we can do better, should do better, and it's sort of our job to create an institutional framework that makes that easier. And of course that includes facilities, it includes technology upgrades, it still includes running a sustainable small business, because that's in some ways the condition for the possibility of transforming lives and academic excellence. You've got to support your faculty, you've got some very good ones. I hear you've got somebody exceptional in journalism, not calling anyone out here, but I think you also need to identify what I would call signature programs. I think there is a danger to be, whatever the saying is, everything to everybody, mm-hmm. right? I think it's important to have this immense breadth and depth, but you also gotta find 6, 8, 10 where it's just like you become the destination, mm-hmm. right? And again, with all the magic that you already have here, I think then it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Mm-hmm. Your students are telling incredible stories of success. There's something unique happening here, and I think again it is a tougher and tougher climate, and I think whatever the ones that understand that will rise, and some will not, institutionally speaking.
I find it interesting that you talk about elevating, multiple programs,
mm-hmm.
8 to 10 programs.
Yep.
Obviously, the University of New Haven, for its forensics, for its criminal justice, yep. is cream of the crop. Yep. It's quite there at the top. And I think there's a lot of underrated programs that, are still within the university yep. community. In your opinion, and this might be a long time down the line, but what's kind of the strategy of elevating, all of those programs so that they can get to that same kind of status as, the forensics and the criminal justice?
Well, I think again, a lot of that is about outcomes, right? So you can for years I felt a little bit like this at first, like I was the only one who knew, right? And you probably feel, the university 100 times better than I do, but it takes exposure, mm-hmm. and there's no better exposure than results. You've got some star faculty, and you create some amazing partnerships that draw a little attention to it. And I think this even starts at the recruiting level, right? So this notion of the pitch for a university can't just be, we've been here since 1722, we've been here since 1920. Like, students today want more, right? And so what is it that in the unique area in which I have interest that you're doing that puts you in the top 3, 5? That can be research, that can be facilities, that can be outcomes, that can be partnerships that you can lean on. The sort of the way in which you partner it with other programs, like the way you build in competency learning, the way you build in certificates. It's about creating edge, in some way substantive edge, that supplements what you're already doing. And really, to your point, sort of developing identities across. And sometimes I think we live in this world of well-kept secrets. You wouldn't know unless you were here that you've got a star journalist profile, right? And so we need to, in a world of overexposure, being best-kept secrets at anything is probably not a good thing, right? And so I think then it's incumbent, and part of that I see as the administrative lift to elevate faculty, programs, students, and so I see my job as being partially that.
Perfect. So kind of stepping back away from, the specifics, I guess. This semester you're going to be more of a commuter role, like you said, not necessarily full hands-on yet. But from what it seemed like in the announcement, one of the plans will be for you to connect with, members of the university community, whether it be students or faculty. Can you kind of describe how you plan on throughout the semester, maybe creating those connections?
Absolutely. Obviously, we'll have lots of meetings, and there's always lots of meetings at universities. I'm sort of one to, I think big meetings are important, and there will be forums, but I also think really sort of understanding, because students, so I come from a place where I had an open door policy. It felt like the people who worked with me were joking. It was like the train station. There were always students coming in and out. Because I think you have to have your finger on the pulse of students, and they have to feel like they can trust you enough to where you're credible, even if at times you have to say something they may not want to hear, right? But so long as they know that you're on their side and that you're going to do everything humanly possible to open doors and create networks and opportunities for them, and the faculty sort of similar, right? They want to feel supported. Sometimes you're in institutional settings where administration and the academy are two different things. You can't live in that world. Everybody needs to be on sort of the same success path. So I envision doing a fair number of sort of both personal. I tend to like smaller groups because I think sometimes people are hesitant in large groups to speak out. I like smaller settings. I really want to understand sort of different divisions. Obviously, I've already had a chance to meet with some faculty, some students, all the deans, some of the senior leadership, but it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind, right? Sure. And it's sort of my job to keep my little notepad, and so this constituency said this, and again, even internal to constituencies, we would look at the student body, and some of your STEM students would say, oh, it's incredible, I do all this research, and then we talk to whatever, the history students, and they'd be like, oh, I'm so underwhelmed, I haven't gone to a conference. So really understanding sort of where some of the pain points, where some of the opportunities are, and again, I'm somebody that I know. As much as I've read, I went into this relatively informed, this whole process, but there's something that you pick up organically from interacting, and it also can't just all be staged to where students feel like, this is my one chance to say this. No, it should be more interactive, and I'm going to be obviously very visible on the campus, and so, yeah, I hope lots of students stop me and kind of say, I've got something for you. So
yeah, can you just take a moment to kind of discuss the process of, obviously, a lot of the students, you got updates constantly of some kind of search process. But can you kind of discuss just briefly like that, how that whole thing kind of played out, and maybe if there was something specifically that drew you to New Haven?
Oh, there was absolutely. So I knew, I have to be honest. So I was very fortunate. I was in the running for a couple of different things, and I said to my wife very early on that University of New Haven's the one, because again, that identity piece that I described, I think is so important. Like, I'm an impact-driven person. If I feel like I can really be helpful, that's what draws me. And on top of that, in a lot of these other places, you could do better on the campus or whatever else. But I actually don't think there's a ceiling here. And this is what drew me originally to Fisk, was national impact, regional impact, change Nashville, really have sort of I see all that just on a much bigger scale at the University of New Haven. I think the sky's the limit, if it is. And actually, I mean, again, this notion of endless possibilities, there's an entrepreneurial spirit, there is this, I referenced the can-do, the willingness to, which again, in academia is not self-evident, right? And so, again, very dynamic board, clearly a very dynamic and successful faculty. Staff seems just super enthused, and then the students. And in terms of the process, and the process is a strange process, right? You sort of meet with every constituency, and sort of between the lines, you kind of try to glean, okay, that sounds slightly like that other constituency, but they have different concerns, right? And so I have to say it was an immensely thorough process. What also stood out about this particular, so students, deans, staff, board of trustees, was the degree to which they were forthcoming about everything. Like I mean, again, I'd read about it, but when you hear it spoken, it just sort of reinforces. So yeah, no, my wife knew very early on that this was the one, and if it worked out, then this is where hopefully we'd be writing the next great chapter. And I think the university is poised for that. I mean, you obviously had a massive upswing, and you've had some wonderful leadership in this period. And so to be able to build on that and sort of take the next great leap, that excited me.
I agree, and as I mentioned a little bit before we started filming that, you know, I've been here for, this is my 5th year now, so kind of to see the progress that it's made, there's a lot of momentum.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people in the university are looking forward to kind of building on that.
Yep.
And it's something that kind of feeds into itself at a certain point and hopefully starts getting bigger and bigger.
Right, it becomes, you're absolutely right. It's like in sports, right? Once you kind of got the ball on your side, then all of a sudden it rolls in your favor,
For
right?
sure.
And
so as we're wrapping up here, is there any message that you have for the university community? Anything that you kind of want them to take away as a first impression, leading into hopefully as you get to know everyone more as the semester goes on?
Well, I mean, I would sort of say the fact that I don't see a ceiling, but I'm going to need we're all going to need a lot of help, right? And it's sort of a case of if you're going to do something genuinely transformative, you got to have complete excitement. I'm sort of a positive guy anyway, but I'm genuinely a believer in the fact that there is a moment in time, at this place, to just knock everybody's socks off. But that's going to take everybody sort of, and students, we're going to need students to get excited, and so hopefully we will very quickly sort of show them areas where there's stuff that begins to sort of bubble up with momentum. And so I would say just please, I'll take all the time in the world to meet with everyone, but we're certainly going to need all hands on deck. So yeah, I hope that's the takeaway.
Perfect. I think that's great for the university community to hear and prepare. That's all the time that we have. Thank you, Dr. Frederickson, for taking time out of your day to talk with us. I know you're obviously busy with everything happening.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
This is an extremely exciting time for the university, community, and everyone involved. And we really look forward to how kind of this transition takes place. And we're really entering a new period in university history. And based on kind of what we talked about today, it seems like there's a lot of momentum and we want to keep it up. So for more university news as it breaks, check us out online or in newsstands around campus. For Charger Bulletin News, I'm Tyler Wells.